Commander Velthak stood before the massive viewing screen in his office on Zephyr Prime. The blue light from 3 suns cast strange shadows across his scaled features as he read the assignment file for the 3rd time. His forearms moved with practiced efficiency as he sorted through intelligence reports about the species called humans. The assignment seemed simple enough. The Galactic Council wanted detailed observations of human warfare tactics. These new beings had joined the galactic community only 50 cycles ago, but had already fought 3 successful campaigns against established military powers. The Council needed to understand how such primitive creatures achieved these victories. Velthak had observed 17 different species in combat during his long career. He had watched the methodical Thraxians reduce entire star systems to ash with their calculated strategies. He had documented the Kalari swarm tactics that overwhelmed enemies through sheer numbers. He had even survived the terrifying blood rage of the Vorthan berserkers. Humans could not possibly be more challenging than what he had already witnessed. The intelligence files painted humans as emotional and unstable beings. They lived barely 100 standard cycles compared to his own species' 500. Their technology was decades behind Zephyrian standards. They had no natural armor, claws, or enhanced strength like most warrior species. Their homeworld was a mid-range planet with standard gravity and atmosphere. Nothing about them suggested military excellence, yet the reports from the Krelian front lines told a different story. The Krelian horde had been expanding across 3 sectors for 20 cycles without serious resistance. Their massive fleets and brutal ground forces had conquered dozens of worlds. Then they encountered human forces defending a small mining colony called New Haven. What should have been a simple conquest turned into a 6-month siege that cost the Krelians more ships than they had lost in the previous 5 cycles. Velthak activated his personal transport and began the journey to the human staging area. During the 3-day trip, he studied every available piece of information about human military structure. Their ships seemed adequate but unremarkable. Their weapons fell within normal parameters for their technology level. Their armor and personal equipment showed clever engineering but nothing revolutionary. The human vessel UNS Defiance waited at the designated coordinates. Velthak's transport docked with minimal ceremony. As he stepped aboard the human ship, immediately noticed the differences from Zephyrian military vessels. The corridors were narrower, and the ceiling lower than what his species preferred. The lighting had a harsh white quality that made his eyes water slightly. Strange smells filled the air, metallic scents mixed with something organic that he could not identify. The temperature felt uncomfortably warm. A human female approached, him with confident steps. She wore a simple uniform with minimal decorations. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical style, and her brown eyes showed neither fear nor excessive deference. "Commander Velthak, I am Lieutenant Commander Tony Rodriguez, the tactical officer," she said with a slight nod. "Captain Morrison is waiting for you on the bridge." Velthak followed Rodriguez through the ship's passages. He observed the crew as they went about their duties. Unlike Zephyrian military personnel who moved with rigid precision, these humans seemed almost casual in their behavior. They spoke to each other in relaxed tones, and some even appeared to be enjoying themselves. The bridge was smaller than he expected. A single large screen dominated the front wall while various stations surrounded a central command area. The captain stood with his back to them, studying data displays. "Captain Morrison," Rodriguez announced. "Commander Velthak has arrived." The human who turned to face them looked exactly like what Velthak had expected from a primitive species commander. Jake Morrison was clearly past his physical prime with gray hair and lines around his eyes. He wore the same simple uniform as his crew with no ceremonial elements. His handshake was firm, but not aggressive. "Welcome aboard the Defiance, Commander," Morrison said. "I hope you find what you're looking for during your stay with us. I am here to observe your tactical methods during combat operations," Velthak replied formally. "The Galactic Council wishes to understand human warfare capabilities." Morrison's expression did not change. "Fair enough. Dr. Lisa Grant will show you to your quarters and brief you on safety procedures. We'll be entering the Kepler 442 system in 18 hours, where we expect to engage Krelian forces." The doctor was a middle-aged human with kind eyes and gentle hands. She led him to a small but adequate cabin that had been modified for his physiology. Grant explained the ship's emergency procedures with thorough professionalism. "The crew has been told about your mission," she said. "They'll answer any questions you have, but try not to interfere with their duties during combat situations." Velthak spent the remaining time before battle observing the crew's preparations. Engineering Chief Kate Sullivan ran diagnostics on weapons systems with casual competence. She joked with her subordinates while performing tasks that would require intense concentration from most species. The weapons officer, a young human named Sam Mitchell, cleaned his personal sidearm with the same care that Zephyrian warriors used for ceremonial blades. When Velthak asked about the ritual significance, Mitchell laughed and said he just wanted it to work properly. Throughout the ship, humans performed their duties with an attitude that confused the Zephyrian observer. They showed no signs of pre-battle, meditation, or mental preparation rituals. No priests blessed their weapons or offered prayers for victory. They simply worked and waited as if approaching combat was routine business. As the ship moved through hyperspace toward the battle zone, Velthak reviewed his initial observations. These humans appeared competent but unremarkable. Their equipment functioned adequately and their procedures seemed sound. He saw nothing that explained their reputation for military effectiveness. Captain Morrison called him to the bridge as they approached the target system. "We'll be dropping out of hyperspace in 5 minutes, Commander. The Krelians have been besieging our forces here for 6 months. Today we break that siege." Velthak activated his recording equipment and prepared to document what he assumed would be another example of primitive tactics against superior foes. He expected to witness either a glorious but doomed charge or a careful withdrawal in the face of overwhelming odds. The bridge crew took their stations with quiet efficiency. No dramatic speeches or battle cries echoed through the ship. No ceremonies marked their transition from peace to war. They simply prepared to fight as if it was their normal occupation. "Dropping out of hyperspace in 10 seconds, announced the navigation officer. Velthak watched the main screen as stars replaced the swirling patterns of hyperspace. Immediately, the tactical display filled with red contact markers showing Krelian vessels. The human fleet appeared scattered and damaged from months of fighting. "All ships, this is Morrison." The captain spoke into his communications device. "Begin. Operation Hammerfall. Execute in 30 seconds." Velthak prepared to witness his first example of human warfare. He had no idea that everything he thought he knew about combat was about to change forever. The tactical display showed what appeared to be a disaster in progress. Human ships scattered across the Kepler 442 system displayed damage indicators and low power readings. Several vessels drifted without apparent engine function, while others limped toward the outer system at reduced speed. Velthak noted this information with satisfaction, as it confirmed his expectations about primitive species fighting advanced enemies. The Krelian fleet maintained perfect formation as they pursued the retreating humans. 12 massive cruisers and 40 smaller vessels moved with the confidence of predators closing in for the kill. Their weapons charged and targeting systems locked onto the fleeing human ships. "Sir, the Krelians are taking the bait," reported Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez from her tactical station. "They're moving into attack formation and increasing speed." Captain Morrison nodded calmly. "Signal the hidden units. Tell them to maintain position until my command." Velthak felt confused by this exchange. What hidden units could the humans possess when their entire fleet was visible on the tactical screen? He had studied the force composition before the battle and accounted for every human vessel in the system. The Krelian commander apparently shared his confidence. The alien fleet accelerated toward the damaged human ships with obvious eagerness. Their formation spread wider to prevent any human vessels from escaping to hyperspace. "Distance to contact 4 minutes," Rodriguez announced. "Engines to full power," Morrison ordered. "All ships, prepare for emergency acceleration on my mark." The bridge crew continued their duties with the same casual efficiency Velthak had observed earlier. No one showed signs of fear or excitement despite the approaching enemy fleet. Dr. Grant monitored medical stations while Chief Sullivan managed power distribution between engines and weapons. Suddenly, the tactical display exploded with new contacts. Human ships emerged from asteroid fields where they had been hiding with Powered down systems. More vessels dropped out of hyperspace behind the Krelian formation. Additional units rose from the shadows of the system's gas giant where they had been concealed. All units, execute hammer fall. Morrison commanded. The retreat instantly became a perfectly coordinated attack. The damaged human ships that had been fleeing suddenly displayed full power and weapons capability. Their apparent distress had been an elaborate deception. Velthak watched in growing amazement as the human fleet executed maneuvers that required precise timing and complete trust between commanders. Ships that had appeared scattered and defeated now moved as components of a single deadly machine. The Krelian fleet found itself surrounded and outgunned in seconds. Their confident pursuit had become a desperate fight for survival as human vessels, attacked from 6 different directions simultaneously. Target the command ship first, Morrison ordered. Take out their coordination and the rest will be easier. Lieutenant Mitchell coordinated the weapons fire from multiple ships with mechanical precision. Velthak observed that the young human showed no emotion as he directed enough firepower to destroy cities. His fingers moved across control surfaces with the same casual competence he had shown while cleaning his sidearm. The first Krelian cruiser died under concentrated human fire. Its shields collapsed and armor melted under sustained energy bombardment. The massive vessel broke apart in a series of explosions that lit the darkness of space. Good shooting, Morrison commented as if discussing weather conditions. Next target. What disturbed Velthak was not the destruction itself, but the human reaction to it. Zephyrian warriors would have celebrated such a victory with ritual displays of triumph. Most species marked the death of enemies with some form of acknowledgement. These humans simply moved on to the next target as if killing was routine business. The battle continued with methodical efficiency. Human ships worked in perfect coordination to isolate and destroy Krelian vessels one by one. Their tactics showed careful planning and flawless execution, but no unnecessary cruelty or waste. A communication came through from another human ship. UNS Guardian to Defiance. We've taken heavy damage and are losing life support. Requesting permission to ram the Krelian flagship. Morrison paused for exactly 3 seconds before responding. Permission granted, Guardian. Give them hell. Velthak watched in horror as the human ship changed course toward the largest Krelian vessel. The Guardian's crew had just volunteered for certain death and their captain had approved the suicide. Mission with casual acceptance, Guardian crew. This is Captain Andrews, came the voice over the communication system. We're going to take some bastards with us. Tell my wife I love her. The bridge crew of the Defiance continued their duties as they watched their comrades die. Dr. Grant monitored the Guardian's life signs until the moment of impact. Chief Sullivan maintained power flow to weapons systems. Rodriguez calculated firing solutions for the next target. The Guardian struck the Krelian flagship at full speed. Both ships vanished in a brilliant explosion that temporarily overloaded the visual sensors. When the glare faded, debris from both vessels drifted silently through space. The Krelian flagship is destroyed, Rodriguez reported in the same tone. She might use to announce lunch was ready. Velthak felt something cold forming in his chest. He had watched the Guardian's crew joke and laugh as they flew toward certain death. They had chosen suicide not from desperation, but as a tactical option. Their sacrifice had eliminated the enemy command ship and demoralized the remaining Krelian forces. The battle continued for another hour, but the outcome was never in doubt after the Guardian's attack. Human ships picked apart the surviving Krelians with patient determination. They offered no quarter and accepted no surrenders, but they also wasted no effort on unnecessary destruction. When the last Krelian vessel died under human fire, the tactical display showed empty space except for floating debris and rescue pods. The human fleet had destroyed an enemy force twice their size without losing more than 3 ships. Secure from battle stations, Morrison announced. Begin search and rescue operations for survivors. The same humans who had just killed thousands of enemies immediately began looking for survivors to save. Medical ships moved among the wreckage searching for life signs. Dr. Grant coordinated relief efforts for both human and Krelian wounded. Velthak reviewed his recordings in bewilderment. The humans had fought with tactical brilliance and deadly efficiency, but they had shown no emotional involvement in the killing. They had accepted the deaths of their comrades without visible grief, and then immediately shifted to saving their enemies. During the post-battle briefing, Captain Morrison explained the operation to his senior staff. The apparent retreat had been planned for months. Human intelligence had identified Krelian tactical preferences and designed a trap to exploit them. The key was making them think they were winning, Morrison said. Krelians become overconfident when they believe victory is certain. That overconfidence made them careless. Velthak realized that the humans had been manipulating their enemies from the beginning. The 6-month siege had not been a desperate defense, but a careful preparation for this moment. Every battle and skirmish had been designed to reinforce Krelian assumptions about human capabilities. As the fleet prepared to move toward the orbital stations where ground fighting continued, Velthak began to understand that he had witnessed something unprecedented. These humans did not fight like any species he had observed before. They combined careful planning with deadly improvisation. They accepted sacrifice without hesitation, but also showed mercy to defeated enemies. Most disturbing of all, they seemed to treat warfare as simply another job that needed to be done properly. The Zephyrian observer realized that his assignment was going to be far more complicated than anyone had expected. These humans were not primitive warriors driven by emotion and instinct. They were something else entirely, and he was not sure the galaxy was prepared for what that meant. The orbital stations around Kepler 442 had been under siege for 6 months. Massive structures that once housed mining operations and trade facilities now served as fortified positions for both human and Krelian forces. The stations showed extensive battle damage from constant fighting, but neither side had gained decisive control. Velthak studied the tactical situation from the bridge of the UNS Defiance as the human fleet approached the contested area. Standard galactic military doctrine would call for either extended bombardment to soften defenses or negotiations to avoid costly ground combat. He expected the humans to follow one of these conventional approaches. Captain Morrison gathered his senior staff for a planning session. The Krelians have fortified 3 main sections of Station Alpha, he said while pointing to a 3-dimensional display. Our people are holding the central hub, but they're running low on supplies and ammunition. Colonel Dan Parker commanded the Marine forces assigned to the operation. He was a large man with scars on his hands and arms that suggested extensive combat experience. We can punch through their perimeter defenses, he said, but it's going to cost us. How many casualties? Morrison asked. 30% minimum if we do it right, Parker replied without emotion. 50% if things go wrong. Velthak felt shocked by this casual discussion of massive losses. The humans were planning an assault that would kill hundreds of their own people, as if it was a routine business decision. Dr. Grant spoke from her position at the planning table. I'll have medical teams standing by on all ships. We can handle the wounded if we get them out quickly enough. Chief Sullivan added her thoughts about equipment requirements. The Marines will need extra power cells for their weapons. Station fighting drains batteries fast. The discussion continued for an hour as the humans planned their assault with methodical precision. They considered every detail from ammunition, supplies to evacuation routes for wounded personnel. What they did not discuss was whether the attack was worth the cost in human lives. Velthak had observed planning sessions among 17 different species. Most military commanders showed some reluctance when facing heavy casualties. They sought alternatives or at least acknowledged the gravity of sending soldiers to die. These humans simply accepted the necessity and moved on to tactical details. Assault began 6 hours later. Velthak accompanied the Marine boarding parties in his role as observer. He wore protective gear designed for his species and carried recording equipment to document human ground combat techniques. Colonel Parker led the first wave personally. His Marines moved through the docking tubes with efficient speed while Krelian defenders fired energy weapons from prepared positions. The narrow passages filled with smoke and flashing lights as both sides exchanged deadly fire. Sergeant Amy Brooks commanded the squad that Velthak followed. She was a small woman who seemed impossibly young for such responsibility, but her Marines obeyed her orders without question. They advanced through corridors filled with debris and bodies while maintaining perfect coordination. Contact front, one Marine called out as Krelian soldiers appeared ahead. The humans immediately took cover and returned fire without visible fear or hesitation. Velthak watched Private Chris Johnson advance alone through heavy enemy fire to reach a wounded comrade. Krelian energy bolts burned the air around him, but he continued moving until he reached the injured Marine. Then he dragged the wounded man to safety while providing covering fire with his other hand. "Nice work, Johnson," Sergeant Brooks commented as if he had performed a routine task. The fighting continued through the station's maze of corridors and chambers. Velthak observed humans performing acts of courage that would earn legendary status among most species. They treated such behavior as normal and expected from everyone. In one section, the Marines discovered that Krelian forces had executed human prisoners. The change in the humans was immediate and terrifying. Their professional efficiency became something darker and more personal. Corporal Jennifer Lane found the bodies of 3 human technicians who had been tortured before death. Her expression did not change, but something shifted in her eyes that made Velthak step backward. "Instinctively spread the word," she said quietly to her squad. "No prisoners in this section." The Marines continued their advance, but their tactics changed. Where before they had fought with calculated aggression, now they fought with cold fury. They used weapons and methods that violated standard rules of warfare but proved devastatingly effective against their enemies. Velthak watched humans set traps using Krelian bodies as bait. He saw them use psychological warfare that reduced enemy soldiers to gibbering wrecks. Most disturbing was how they coordinated these brutal tactics while maintaining perfect discipline and unit cohesion. Private Bobby Turner held a strategic corridor, alone for 4 hours after his entire squad was killed. Velthak found him surrounded by Krelian bodies while he constructed improvised explosives from equipment scattered around the area. "How many enemies have you killed?" Velthak asked Turner, looked up from his work with blood-stained hands. "Stopped counting after 20, he said. "Does it matter?" The private had suffered wounds that should have been fatal but continued fighting through willpower and combat stimulants. His casual attitude toward both death and killing disturbed the Zephyrian observer more than the violence itself. When reinforcements finally arrived, Turner was still conscious and still fighting. He had held the position against overwhelming odds using nothing but determination and creative use of available resources. The battle for the station continued for 18 hours before Krelian resistance collapsed. Human Marines had fought through conditions that would break most species while maintaining their tactical effectiveness and unit discipline. During the final assault on the Krelian command center, Velthak witnessed something that challenged everything he thought he knew about warfare. The remaining Krelian soldiers attempted to surrender, but the humans in that section had found more evidence of prisoner executions. The Marines accepted the surrender, but their treatment of prisoners reflected their anger about executed comrades. They provided medical care and followed basic protocols, but they made it clear that mercy was a choice, rather than an obligation. What disturbed Velthak most was how quickly the humans could shift between professional soldiers and something much more dangerous. They retained their discipline and tactical skills while accessing levels of aggression that few species could match. After the station was secured, Colonel Parker walked through the areas where fighting had been heaviest. He stopped to speak with wounded Marines and check on prisoner-holding areas. His demeanor showed concern for his people and professional respect for defeated enemies' casualties. He asked Sergeant Brooks. 32 dead, 68 wounded, she replied. Within acceptable parameters for this type of operation, Velthak realized that the humans had achieved exactly what they planned. Their casualty projections had been accurate, and their tactical objectives had been met. The cost in lives was exactly what they had calculated and accepted before the battle began. As medical teams worked to save wounded soldiers from both sides, Velthak began to understand what made humans different from other species. They could access extreme levels of violence when necessary, but they could also control and direct that violence with conscious intent. The Zephyrian observer spent the next several hours interviewing human personnel about their experiences during the battle. Their responses revealed a disturbing pattern of acceptance regarding both killing and dying. "Someone has to do the dirty work," Private Turner explained when asked about his corridor defense. "Might as well be me." This casual acceptance of sacrifice and violence appeared throughout his interviews. The humans did not seek glory or honor through combat. They simply did what they believed was necessary, and then moved on to the next task. Velthak realized that he was documenting something unprecedented in galactic history. These humans had weaponized their capacity for both compassion and cruelty, while maintaining conscious control over when to use each quality. The victory celebration that Velthak expected never came. After securing the orbital station, the human fleet did not mark their success with ceremonies or displays of triumph. Instead, they immediately began rescue and medical operations with the same efficient focus they had shown during combat. Velthak followed Dr. Grant through the medical bays that had been established in the captured sections of the station. Human and Krelian wounded lay side by side while medical teams worked to save as many lives as possible. The same people who had been killing each other hours earlier now shared medical supplies and treatment facilities. "How can you treat them after what they did to your prisoners?" Velthak asked, as he watched Grant perform surgery on a wounded Krelian soldier. The doctor continued her work without pausing. "The fighting is over," she said. "My job is to save who I can regardless of which side they fought for." This contradictory behavior confused the Zephyrian observer. Grant had been present during the planning sessions where humans calmly discussed acceptable casualty rates. She had coordinated medical support for Marines who used brutal tactics against their enemies. Now she worked to save the lives of those same enemies with gentle care. In another section of the medical bay, Velthak observed Corporal Jennifer Lane helping to move wounded Krelian soldiers to treatment areas. This was the same human who had ordered no prisoners taken after finding executed comrades. Her anger had driven tactical decisions that resulted in significant enemy casualties. "Why are you helping them now?" Velthak asked. Lane looked up from the stretcher she was carrying. "Because they're wounded and need help," she replied as if the answer was obvious. The Zephyrian observer realized that humans could compartmentalize their emotions and actions in ways that other species found impossible. They could fight with deadly efficiency when necessary, and show compassion when fighting was no longer required. Captain Morrison walked through the station corridors, checking on his personnel and assessing damage. He stopped to speak with wounded Marines and thank them for their service. His concern for their welfare seemed genuine despite his earlier willingness to accept heavy casualties. 32 good people died taking this station, he told Velthak. Each one of them knew the risks and chose to be here anyway. That choice deserves respect. Velthak noted that Morrison referred to the dead as individuals rather than acceptable losses. The captain had calculated casualty rates before the battle, but he also mourned each death personally. This combination of practical planning and emotional investment appeared throughout the human fleet. Commander Patricia Webb coordinated relief efforts for civilian refugees who had been trapped on the station during the siege. She worked with the same methodical efficiency that characterized human military operations, but focused on saving lives rather than taking them. "We found 300 civilians in the lower sections," she reported to Morrison. "Most are malnourished, but alive. Medical teams are checking them now." The commander had fought through the station's corridors hours earlier, while leading assault teams against fortified Krelian positions. Now she organized food distribution and temporary housing with equal dedication. Her transition from warrior to caregiver happened without apparent internal conflict. Lieutenant Frank Turner volunteered for the most dangerous missions despite losing his entire squad during the initial assault. Velthak found him working alone to clear unexploded ordnance from civilian areas. The young officer moved through potential blast zones with careful precision. "This needs to be done before we can bring families back," Turner explained. "Someone has to take the risk." Velthak realized that humans approached both combat and peacekeeping with the same fundamental attitude. They identified necessary tasks and accepted responsibility for completing them, regardless of personal cost. This willingness to sacrifice for others appeared to be a core element of their psychology. The medical reports provided disturbing insights into human capabilities during extended combat. Many Marines had continued fighting with wounds that should have disabled them. They had used combat stimulants and psychological techniques to push beyond normal biological limits. Sergeant Amy Brooks had led her squad for 12 hours while suffering from internal bleeding caused by shrapnel wounds. She had coordinated tactical operations and maintained unit morale without revealing her condition to subordinates. "I couldn't let my people see weakness," she explained to Velthak during her medical treatment. "They needed me to be strong so they could be strong too." This pattern repeated throughout the human forces. Officers and enlisted personnel had hidden injuries and exhaustion to maintain effectiveness for their units. They had made personal sacrifices to preserve group cohesion and mission capability. Private Chris Johnson had held his strategic corridor position, despite losing massive amounts of blood from multiple wounds. Medical examination revealed that he had used improvised tourniquets and stimulants to remain conscious and combat effective. "How did you continue fighting in that condition?" Velthak asked. Johnson shrugged while medical technicians treated his wounds. "My squad mates were counting on me," he said. "Couldn't let them down." The private showed no pride in his actions or desire for recognition. He had nearly died holding a position because he believed others depended on him. This sense of mutual obligation appeared to drive human behavior in ways that Velthak had never observed among other species. Dr. Grant worked for 36 hours straight, treating wounded from both sides without rest. When Velthak asked about her endurance, she explained that medical personnel had trained for extended operations under combat conditions. "We use stimulants and rotation schedules to maintain effectiveness," she said. "But mostly we just do what needs to be done until it's finished." The doctor's casual attitude toward extreme physical and mental stress reflected a broader human approach to difficult situations. They accepted hardship as normal and expected rather than exceptional circumstances, requiring special recognition. Velthak interviewed dozens of human personnel during the aftermath of the battle. Their responses revealed consistent patterns of behavior that distinguished them from other species he had observed. They showed loyalty to their units that transcended normal military discipline. They accepted sacrifice as routine rather than heroic. They could shift between extreme violence and gentle compassion based on situational requirements. Most importantly, they maintained their core values regardless of external pressures. "What makes you different from other species?" Velthak asked Captain Morrison during their final interview. Morrison considered the question carefully before responding. "Maybe we're just stubborn," he said. "When we decide something is worth doing, we don't quit until it's finished, even if it costs us everything." The captain's explanation seemed inadequate to describe what Velthak had witnessed. These humans had demonstrated capabilities that went far beyond simple determination. They had shown an ability to weaponize their psychological strengths while maintaining their moral foundation. As the fleet prepared to leave the Kepler 442 system, Velthak reviewed his recordings and notes. The humans had achieved complete victory against a superior enemy force while maintaining their essential humanity. They had killed when necessary and shown mercy when possible. The Zephyrian observer realized that human effectiveness in warfare did not come from superior technology or advanced tactics. It came from their unique ability to access extreme levels of performance while retaining conscious control over their actions and emotions. This combination of capabilities made them unlike any species in the galaxy. They could be trusted as allies because they maintained their values under pressure. They should be feared as enemies because they could fight without moral constraints when necessary. Velthak understood that his mission to document human warfare had revealed something that would change galactic politics forever. The question was whether the Galactic Council was prepared to learn what he had discovered about the true nature of human military capability. Velthak sat in his quarters aboard the Zephyrian transport ship as it traveled through hyperspace toward his home system. The journey would take 5 days, giving him time to prepare his report on human warfare capabilities. He had recorded thousands of hours of data and conducted over 100 interviews with human personnel. The assignment had seemed routine when he received it months earlier. Document human tactics, identify weaknesses, and provide recommendations for future diplomatic and military interactions. The Galactic Council expected standard analysis of another primitive species that had achieved temporary success through luck or circumstance. Now Velthak faced the impossible task of explaining what he had actually witnessed. How could he describe Humans in terms that other species would understand when he was not sure he understood them himself. He activated his personal workstation and began reviewing the recorded data. The space battle footage showed tactical brilliance and perfect coordination under pressure. Human ships had executed maneuvers that required absolute trust between commanders and flawless timing across multiple units. The ground combat recordings revealed even more disturbing capabilities. Human Marines had fought through conditions that would break most species while maintaining unit cohesion and tactical effectiveness. They had adapted to changing situations with creative solutions that violated conventional military doctrine, but achieved decisive results. Velthak paused the recording at a section showing Private Bobby Turner defending his corridor position alone. The young human had held his ground for 4 hours against overwhelming odds using improvised weapons and psychological warfare. His casual attitude toward both killing and dying represented something that challenged basic assumptions about sentient behavior. The Zephyrian observer had witnessed Turner's interview after the battle, where he explained his actions with simple words. "Someone has to do the dirty work," he had said. "Might as well be me." This acceptance of sacrifice appeared throughout Velthak's recordings. Humans did not seek glory or honor through combat. They simply identified necessary tasks and accepted responsibility for completing them regardless of personal cost. Their willingness to bear any burden for others made them unlike any species in galactic civilization. The medical bay recordings showed another aspect of human psychology that defied easy analysis. Dr. Grant had treated wounded enemies with the same care she gave to human casualties. The transition from warfare to humanitarian assistance happened without apparent internal conflict. Velthak had asked her about this contradiction during their interview. Her response haunted him still. "The fighting is over," she had said. "Now we save who we can." The same humans who planned acceptable casualty rates before battle immediately began rescue operations afterward. They could kill efficiently when necessary, and show mercy when killing was no longer required. This psychological flexibility gave them tactical advantages that other species could not match. He reviewed his notes from conversations with Captain Morrison about human military philosophy. The captain had explained that humans viewed warfare as an extension of problem-solving rather than an expression of natural aggression. They fought to achieve specific objectives and stopped fighting when those objectives were met. "We don't fight because we like it," Morrison had said. "We fight because sometimes it's the only way to protect what matters to us." This distinction between violence as a tool and violence as an instinct appeared to be fundamental to human psychology. They could access extreme levels of aggression when necessary, but they could also control and direct that aggression with conscious intent. Velthak began drafting his official report using standard military analysis formats. He described human, tactical capabilities and unit organization in technical terms that would be familiar to Galactic Council reviewers. He documented their weapons technology and ship specifications with precise measurements, but as he worked, he realized that the technical details missed the essential truth about human warfare. Their effectiveness did not come from superior equipment or advanced tactics. It came from their unique psychological makeup and their ability to weaponize their capacity for both love and hate. The real report would need to explain that humans had solved the fundamental problem of warfare. They had learned to fight with maximum brutality while maintaining their moral core. They could kill without becoming killers, and show mercy without becoming weak. Velthak deleted his draft and started again. This time he tried to describe the psychological observations that made humans different from other species. He wrote about their willingness to sacrifice for others and their ability to compartmentalize emotions during combat operations. After several hours of writing, he realized that his superiors would not believe his conclusions. The idea that a primitive species could possess such advanced psychological capabilities would seem impossible to beings who had observed warfare for millennia. He reviewed recordings of his interview with Corporal Jennifer Lane about her treatment of prisoners after finding executed comrades. She had ordered brutal reprisals during combat, but helped wounded enemies during medical operations. Her ability to shift between roles based on circumstances represented capabilities that most species found impossible. The Galactic Council would interpret his report as evidence of human instability rather than psychological sophistication. They would see contradictions where he had observed adaptability. They would perceive weakness where he had documented strength. Velthak realized that some knowledge was too dangerous to share. His analysis of human capabilities would terrify the galactic community and potentially lead to preemptive military action against Earth. The humans were dangerous not because they were savage, but because they had weaponized their capacity for moral behavior. He thought about his final conversation with Private Turner before leaving the human fleet. The young soldier had just volunteered for hazardous duty clearing unexploded ordnance from civilian areas. When asked why he continued to risk his life, Turner had given an answer that summarized everything Velthak had learned. "Someone has to," Turner had said. "Might as well be me." This casual acceptance of responsibility for others appeared to be the foundation of human psychology. They did not fight for conquest or glory. They fought to protect what they valued, and they were willing to pay any price necessary to fulfill that obligation. The Zephyrian observer understood that his mission had failed in ways that his superiors could never imagine. They had expected him to find weaknesses to exploit in a primitive species. Instead, he had discovered that humans were the most psychologically advanced warriors in galactic history. Their greatest weapon was not their technology or tactics. It was their refusal to let war make them into monsters. They remained capable of mercy and compassion, even in the darkest circumstances. This combination of deadly capability and moral foundation made them unlike any other species. Velthak made his decision as the transport ship approached Zephyr Prime. He deleted all of his analysis and draft reports from the official database. In their place, he entered a brief summary that recommended avoiding conflict with humans at all costs. His real report would remain in his personal files as a reminder of what he had witnessed. The galaxy was safer not knowing exactly what humans were capable of when pushed to their limits. Some truths were too dangerous for civilized beings to understand. The official report he submitted to the Galactic Council contained only technical specifications and tactical observations. He recommended treating humans as valuable allies rather than potential threats. He suggested that their military effectiveness came from superior training and equipment rather than psychological advantages. Velthak kept the real truth to himself. He had witnessed the future of warfare, and it belonged to a species that could fight like demons while remaining fundamentally human. The galaxy would be safer as long as humans remained friends rather than enemies. As he prepared to disembark at Zephyr Prime, Velthak reflected on the changes in his own understanding. He had begun the mission believing that military effectiveness came from superior technology and tactical training. Now he knew that the most dangerous warriors were those who fought for love rather than hate. The humans had taught him that true strength came from the willingness to sacrifice everything for others while maintaining the wisdom to know when sacrifice was necessary. This combination of capabilities made them unlike any species in galactic civilization, and more dangerous than any force the galaxy had ever encountered. Velthak carried this knowledge alone as he returned to his normal duties. The secret of human warfare would remain with him until the day he died, protecting both humans and the galaxy from the consequences of that terrible understanding.